We'll start straight in with the minutes. Have any of you seen the minutes? Yes, yeah. Can I take them as being correct? Aye. Right. So can I sign? Where do I sign at the bottom? Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. You okay? Right. Okay. Are there any apologies, please?
Yes, Mrs. Janet Johnson.
Janet Johnson. More apologies. Okay.
Madam Chairman, we haven't received any apologies for this evening.
Except for Janet.
Yeah,
yeah. Okay, thank you. Declaration of interest. No? You haven't seen the agenda? No, it's a bit awkward, really. It's a very short agenda, but it could be a longer meeting. We do have a gentleman.
I think he's joined the meeting now.
I think his name is Peter Axon, and he's the interim CEO, Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent Integrated Care System, ICS, and Integrated Care Board, ICB, and he's going to give us a presentation. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Councillor. Hello, everybody. Hopefully, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Brilliant. Good. The joys of technology. Marvellous. Shall I begin? If that's okay.
I think so.
Okay. Oh, I can see myself on full screen there. It's rather disconcerting, but there we are. Thank you firstly for inviting me here today. I've got a short presentation which I've noticed Jenny is helpfully on the call, who's one of our senior comms team, and as if by magic she's popped it up on my screen. I don't know if you're able to bring that up onto your big screen as well. Brilliant. I can see that's happened. So if people are okay, I can't hear you very well. I can kind of hear you, but if it's okay, I'll begin, head through the presentation, and then take any questions at the end, if that's all right. It's not a very long presentation, you'll be pleased to know. Just salient points with regard to where we're at with the development of the ICS. So Jenny, if we can move to the next slide, please. First thing to say is that we are quite close now to the legal establishment of the integrated care system and the integrated care board. And I'll explain the difference between those two terms in a moment, in that the ICS will be fully established, legally established on the 1st of July, only a couple of weeks away now. Just in terms of the sort of broader perspective, there are nationally across England 42 ICSs in total. Generally, they tend to be on county footprints, but some aren't. And in terms of scale, they range from I think Shropshire being the smallest ICS at a population of circa 600 or so thousand, all the way up through to certain London ICSs that have got populations, I think, probably in excess of 2.5 million. So quite a range of size of ICSs. But as I say, on average, the population is about the size of actually the Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent footprint. So I think we're slap bang in the middle in terms of size of ICSs at a population of around 1.1 million. So this slide describes what I'll take you through over the next couple of slides in terms of vision, key aims, and then a little bit of detail in relation to our emerging structure. Next slide, please, Jenny. So you can see in front of you there that the 4 key purposes of all integrated care systems. So that's population health and healthcare and improving outcomes through population health management, tackling inequalities, enhancing productivity. The money thing is in there. And fundamentally, for me, the most important aspect of really why we are forming ICSs, and perhaps the most relevant bit of the conversation here this afternoon, is the piece around supporting broader social and economic developments, particularly addressing wider determinants of health and social care need. Okay, let's move to the next slide, please. So this one outlines in very summary form what's quite an important narrative, which is fundamentally around our purpose as an ICS. So although we've not legally yet established, we've been operating for over a year now in shadow form with an ICS partnership board across Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent and subgroups underneath that to build some of these key building blocks so that we've got something to start with once we're established on the 1st of July. So you can see on the right hand side of the slide our purpose, you can see on the left hand side our vision, and you can see within the triangle there those 4 key purposes, those 4 key objectives of all ICSs that I mentioned a moment ago. Historically, we've had 4 what we've termed aspirational priorities that are bespoke to Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent ICS. And you can see there that they're recovery, system savings, frailty and health inequalities. As we go through this year, we are required, and it's important, we're not just required to, it's important that we do produce our own system strategy, our own 3 to 5 year strategy. And it's likely that we will review, refresh and evolve those aspirational priorities. But for now, we've retained those as we transition into the 1st of July. OK, next slide, please, Jenny. So I won't go through this in detail. You'll be pleased to know, perhaps, but essentially what you have in front of you there are 9 key areas, key aims for both our ICS and I would say more generally all ICSs. They to a large extent emulate the detail provided on the previous slide, but they've got a level of subtlety to them beyond the last slide. For example, use of data, use of technology, ensuring fundamentally that things like population health management, understanding the detail within our joint strategic needs assessments, all very much drive our ambition, our strategy, and how we'll look to operate and deliver services into the future. So that digital agenda is key, as of course is the workforce agenda as well. So this slide captures in a little more detail our ambition as an ICS beyond the 4 key ambitions described on the previous slide. OK, Jenny, next slide, please. So the next couple of slides get into a little more detail with regard to the structure of our ICS. Some of this is within our gift to define. Other aspects are mandated as part of the legislation. So the mandated elements, I'll start with that, are the 3 on the left hand side. So our Integrated Care Board, which is a new construct on the 1st of July. We've been operating in shadow form to date, but legally it will be constituted on the 1st of July. The ICB is a unitary board. So although it has partner members, 2 local authority members from our upper tier local authority council, Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, partner members from NHS trusts and a GP partner member, singular, it is a unitary board. So once members sit around that board, they have equal accountability and responsibility for all of the activities that take place within that board, which effectively is the definition of a unitary board. So the ICB is the overseeing body that will ensure that the integrated care system itself, the partner group of partners that deliver the various solutions, the ICB makes sure that all of those partners operate in an effective way and that we're delivering on our strategy, which leads me to the second circle, the Integrated Care Partnership, which is an overseeing group. It's a partnership. It's a group of organisations which will include district and borough representation as well as upper tier local authority representation. And in fact, in total, it comes to something like, I think, 60 members. It will periodically meet throughout the year and its core responsibility is to endorse the system strategy, the integrated care system strategy, and then monitor progress delivering that strategy throughout the year. So it's likely that the integrated care partnership will probably meet every quarter, so 4 times a year, to, as I say, both sign the strategy off and monitor progress. You'll all know, I'm sure very well, the role of health and wellbeing boards within all ICSs or all systems, and the 2 health and wellbeing boards that we have in upper tier local authorities will remain. They will have a very clear focus on ensuring that continued integrated and improving relationship between health and social care. And of course, they'll also have responsibility for developing and signing off and monitoring delivery of the health and wellbeing board strategies. Of course, it's important that we make sure that the overarching strategy that we have at the Integrated Care Partnership works hand in glove with the strategies that are developed at both the Stoke-on-Trent Health and Wellbeing Board and the Staffordshire Health and Wellbeing Boards. Right, if you like, the engine room now of delivery and how we're looking to evolve the system, moving away from competition to more collaboration, are the last 2 elements. So firstly, what we're terming our place-based partnerships, which we're orientating around our upper tier local authority footprints. And essentially, this is to ensure that we do more at a local level where it merits it. So that's where we have more horizontal, what we term horizontal integration, where there's a close relationship or an opportunity for a close relationship between services that very much sit close to patient and citizen need, whether that be pharmacy, general practice services, community mental health services, and of course social care services. So this isn't about creating legal entities. That's absolutely not what it's about, but it is about making sure that our planning, our coordination, and of course our delivery focuses a lot more on organising our services around the needs of local populations, as opposed to what historically in the NHS and to an extent arguably social care we've been very good at, which is chasing demand. And that's why place-based partnerships and to an extent provider collaboratives are key to all of this, in that they're 2 key vehicles that will enable us to understand need and wrap services around that local need, as opposed to, as I said, chase demand. And our provider collaborative arrangements, which have already formed to some extent both nationally and locally, will ensure that specialist subject matter experts come together to address specific issues. So mental health collaboration, particularly in certain regards, so child and adolescent mental health, for example, eating disorders, are 2 collaborations that have already been set up locally and nationally. And the urgent and emergency care agenda is, I think, another example where provider collaboration to ensure that we address that urgent care flow challenge, whether that be ambulances waiting at the front door of A&E, all the way through to social care capacity and need and staffing resource, ensuring that we can manage that entire continuum effectively. And of course, providers close to that operate across that continuum, operating as a collaborative. So the last 2 items, I suppose, I've dwelled on because they are, for me, the 2 newer vehicles that we're evolving within the system to fundamentally operate more based on need of the population and the citizen, rather than that reactive demand approach that historically the NHS has very much utilised. Okay, Jenny, let's go to the next slide. So, reasonably busy slide, but what essentially this describes is the senior structure of the Integrated Care Board and how it relates to other parties that I've just mentioned. So you can see there the unitary ICB. You can see it needs to clearly have a relationship with the Integrated Care Partnership and the Health and Wellbeing Boards. But what you can also see vertically is that we are creating a governance arrangement, and an arrangement that essentially creates an assurance mechanism to determine whether we're delivering what we need to do within the system. And for those that understand and have seen NHS provider and NHS foundation trust structures, and also private sector structures to an extent, you may recognise the structure that sits under the ICB here. So an audit committee, a quality and safety committee, a people committee, finance committee. So it's I hate to use the term traditional, but it is a relatively traditional way of setting up a governance structure to seek assurance, to test whether we are, as an integrated care board, confident that the system's doing what it needs to do. The senior leadership team there at the bottom is an executive group. So that would be the chief executives of the upper tier local authorities and the NHS coming together on a regular basis, again, doing the same as the board, but in an executive form. So seeking assurance, making sure that we're happy that all parties are delivering to our annual plan and delivering to our strategy. Next slide, Jenny, please. So I've already described this a little bit, but I think the important point within this is the fact that the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, is a unitary board. So whether it's John Rouse or another from the city, John Henderson or another from the city, the two representatives from the local authorities that will sit as partner members on the ICB are there as unitary board members, as is the general practice, sorry, the primary care representative that sits on the board, as will be the two NHS Trust partner members. And of course, as will be the non-executives and executives that will also sit on the board, which I think neatly takes me to the next slide, Jenny, which does, so that does describe there for you, both myself and Prem as the chief executive and chair, but also our non-executive directors who are independent individuals, all with specific backgrounds to support key elements of the organisation. So you can see at the bottom of the slide, we describe which of those board committees each of the individuals will chair. And as such, as you would imagine, we've selected individuals with relevance to those backgrounds. So, for example, Josephine Spencer. Josie is a recently retired chief executive from the NHS, actually, but her background, she started as a nurse. Trained as a nurse. So being chair of the quality committee is obviously pretty relevant in both regards. And we've got an eclectic mix of backgrounds. So both Julie and Showkat have quite a significant local authority background. Megan, significant learning disabilities background. And David Pearson, some of you may know, has been in Staffordshire for quite a long time and was actually chief nurse at Combined Healthcare back in the day. So all have relevant backgrounds, but again, quite a diverse mix, which we feel is really important for any board, frankly, let alone an ICS. Jenny, next slide, please. So last couple of slides, I think. So I've already described this to some extent. The Integrated Care Partnership, that very senior forum that pulls together all partners and ensures that our strategy is fit for purpose as a system, but also we're delivering against that strategy. The ICP is forming, so we are looking to hold our first Integrated Care Partnership meeting in July, so shortly after we're legally established. Date to be finalised, but as you can imagine, it's a little bit complicated trying to pull 60 or so quite important individuals with quite restricted diaries into a meeting, so we may need to be a little bit flexible about it, but we do hope that the first meeting will happen in July. And in that meeting, we'll look to do a little bit of development work. So talk about how we'll create our strategy over the next 10 or so months, what our operating plan in the meantime is for this year, and how we're going to operate as an ICP. So do a little bit of OD, organisational development work, at that first session. We'll also, in the ICB, have an opportunity going forward, as well as to monitor the strategy, to do deep dives into some important areas. And I personally think that the wider determinants agenda, whether that be housing, other aspects of social need and care, the loneliness agenda. I heard a statistic recently that Loneliness in mortality terms is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day, which is awful, isn't it? There's a whole host of agendas out there that I think the ICB can deep dive into to both sort of create the culture and feel of mutual understanding of the opportunity that each of the agencies around the table can bring, but also the challenges that the agencies face, but also create that direction of travel to ensure that we do absolutely focus on those wider determinants into the future. So there's a huge amount of opportunity through the Integrated Care Partnership and that partnership working ethos that we can bring into the ICS going forward. Okay, Jenny, next slide. Place-based partnership update. I mentioned it a moment ago. Some of you will be familiar with the white paper recently introduced. It's probably about a month or so old now. The integration white paper that puts a significant focus on place, a significant focus on wider determinants, and a significant focus on ensuring that those local resources I described a moment ago, those horizontally linked resources are made the most of, particularly the prevention agenda. And you'll be pleased to know that as we're finalising our operating plans for this year, 22-23 year, prevention is absolutely going to be and is currently front and centre of those operating plans. At the bottom of that slide, you'll see, I mentioned a moment ago, I think that digital and workforce in particular are seen as key drivers of improvement at that localized place level. So building strategies for how we're going to improve our digital agenda and how we're going to improve our workforce agenda won't just be done at system level. We hope and expect that they'll be done at a much more granular localized level. So for example, things like how we create a formal relationship between social care and healthcare and give people career paths, formalised, clear career paths, moving from social care roles to health or vice versa, frankly, is an example of how we can ground and localise that workforce agenda and strategy. Right, next slide, please, Jenny. I think this is the last slide, you'll be pleased to know. So just a very brief note on key challenges and opportunities over the next year. Really practically, you can see the three key challenges at the top of the slide there, that although vaccinations may seem a little bit out of date, the reality is it absolutely isn't out of date. We completely need to keep up our booster program. We absolutely need to make sure that vaccinations are front and centre. And of course, going into the winter, it won't just be COVID, it will be flu and other vaccinations as well. So that is absolutely front and centre. The healthcare backlogs, of course, are also really, really important. We're working hard on them, but they remain a significant challenge for us, particularly as we go into winter with all the pressures, of course, that winter brings. And then more broadly, workforce pressures, which of course create risk relating to the first 2 points. We are in a similar position to all other ICSs, workforce challenges across the board, whether that be from a voluntary perspective or from a more substantive perspective. And they affect all aspects of our services, whether that be general practice, mental health services, all the way through to acute services and A&E. So it's a really tough challenge, and as somebody recently said to me, workforce management and workforce oversight is a bit like planting a tree. You don't get results immediately, you need to wait for a period of time. And of course, in certain regards, we don't have a long period of time, so we need to mitigate the immediate risks whilst we're watching that tree grow, whilst we're watching folk come through higher education, become qualified, and then move into employment. So frankly, we need to do both, mitigate and manage the current risks whilst ensuring that we've got the right training and development programmes in place, both nationally and locally, to ensure that the workforce situation is in a really good place going forward. And the last couple of points really try and accentuate the conversation I've been having with you over the last 20 or so minutes. It describes the opportunity that we've got as a collective, as a group. Someone described to me the ICS initiative as a movement. recently, and I didn't quite get it in the moment. It felt a bit bizarre and left field, a movement. But what essentially they were trying to describe was the fundamental transition, cultural transition from a hugely competitive environment that the Foundation Trust, the monitor regime in the NHS created over many, many years, to an environment that fundamentally respects the fact that it's a single pound that we're spending, a single taxpayer pound. We're collectively accountable and responsible, and we collectively have the ability to make things better. So we need to stop fighting with one another for that pound and ensure that we collectively spend that pound and do the best we can for citizens in a collective, supportive manner. Right, there endeth the sermon by Peter Axon. I'll stop there if that's okay. I think that is the end of the presentation. So happy to take any questions, folks.
Thank you very much, Peter. Very good presentation. Are there any questions from us?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. From a South Staffordshire patient's perspective, how will their, I don't like this phrase, but their patient journey, how will they experience a difference in the next 1 to 2 years? What will be impacting them the most? And a second question, we know that everything is constant change now, particularly in healthcare. What sort of lifetime have you given the ICS before it morphs into something else? I'm just cognizant of the fact that we have all these different things about education and healthcare, but they never seem to last long before they're changed again. Thank you.
No, that really good question. So, in terms of what will be different, I personally think that the fundamental point that I made at the end around organisations stopping vying for money, the same pound, competition occurring left, right, and centre, and effectively sucking energy out of the system in just to do competition, just to try and get one over your competitor. And those competitors are NHS to NHS, NHS to social care, NHS to voluntary sector. So it's not as though we're dealing with the private sector in that regard. Just the simple transition of moving the energy from fundamentally competition, creating a competitive environment, to fundamentally working together and removing the cracks from the system and doing all of those things that we didn't dwell on before because we didn't have the motivation, we didn't have the contractual levers, we didn't have the systemic levers to do before. I think that will make a massive difference because it will enable us to concentrate more on, and I mentioned this on a number of occasions in the presentation, concentrate fundamentally more on need, moving away from concentrating on demand. So rather than constantly firefighting in A&E, we'll look at the needs of patients at a local level through the lens of prevention, through the lens of, positive preventative upstream activity, ensuring that we get to individuals before they deteriorate to a place of needing A&E or of needing critical care. Now that isn't going to happen overnight because it's as much a cultural change as it is a technical one. And I'm sure all of you in the room will appreciate that piece around cultural change does take time. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, I think, is the well-coined phrase. So it will take a period of time, but I do hope that over the next year, we'll move organisations into a place where they appreciate, they understand, and they embrace that change in approach to working, to operating. And from there, we've got the springboards to be able to then build programmes of work that are far more meaningful to citizens, to individuals on the ground. There was a recent report that came out, it was probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago, that was called the Fuller Stocktake. So a lady called Claire Fuller coordinated the review, hence Fuller Stocktake. Claire, by trade, as it were, is a GP. She's also an ICS chief executive down in the south. but Claire was asked to do this because of her background as a GP. And the report, although it's very detailed and it's taken a long time to pull together lots of research, fundamentally goes to the point I've just made, that opportunity and need to wrap services holistically around those that are the most vulnerable in society, that whether that be children with special needs, complex needs, or frail and elderly adults that, you know, risk admission to A&E. That opportunity to wrap our services more proactively around local need is the fundamental difference I see in the entire ICS's evolution. But as I say, that's a cultural piece as much as it's a technical piece, and it's not going to happen overnight. To answer your second question, I wish I had a crystal ball sometimes, because A, I'd be rather well off, and B, it would help me answer such philosophical questions as when's the next NHS reorganisation going to happen. The positive, I suppose, is that the provider side of the NHS actually hasn't changed much for many, many years. So as much as I've kind of been relatively negative about the Foundation Trust regime and the competitive regime that's been and gone, that was actually around for about 20 years. So I think the FT Foundation Trust piece came in back in 2001, 2, something like that. So the provider side of the NHS has stayed relatively stable for quite a long time. Now, what's happening with the ICS compared to the CCGs is that the divide has been broken down between commissioner and provider. So relationships are seen as key. The more closely working and operating arrangement within the system. So in part, that means that commissioners move nearer to provision. The relationship improves. Knowledge and understanding of one another's motivations, etc., improves. That gives the potential to reduce the change after change after change that we've seen in the commissioning landscape over the last 20 years. That's probably changed every 3 years or so, because essentially we're breaking down that divide between commissioners and provision. That's not to say that we're going to create a huge amount of conflict of interest and cartels across the system. That's just to say that we're going to operate in a different cultural way. So if you're to take that theory, I suppose, what I'm trying to say is that because provision hasn't changed for a long time and we're now moving more closely together, I think there's an opportunity to create stability over a longer period of time. I'm merely, though, the interim chief executive of one of the 42 ICSs. So as much as I'm saying that, you know, I'm not the NHS chief executive, nor am I a politician in central government. So, you know, I'm not entirely sure what they're thinking right now, but I'm sure they're going to give this new operating model a significant go.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much, Councillor Burnett. I believe Councillor Barron would like to question.
Thank you, Peter, for a good presentation. I hope I don't sound cynical here, but having worked in social work for over 40 years, I can't help saying what's new. I've heard it all before. You know, we always used to laugh that we were on the wheel. We were like you know, the rat on the wheel. That after so many years, someone new, bright spark, as we always used to say, came into the organisation and came up with a new idea, and off we went again. So it really, one of my questions are, A, what's so different now that we haven't heard before? I mean, he's gone by social care and health joined together in the reablement service, which was a superb service. And I'm you know, having been retired 5 years ago now, all I hear now is we don't do reablement. Social workers don't go into hospitals, you know, like we used to. And so people don't get reablement. And I can't help thinking that lots of money has been wasted on hours of training to go out the window. And so how can we, how can we be sure that this service now is any better than the ones we've heard before? Because all I'm saying is, yes, I'm pleased to hear there's more services involved, but I can't help thinking that it's not the same service that we've always heard, just under a different name.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just writing a few notes down on the back of that. So again, really, really good question, really good point, to an extent linked to the first question. I suppose what I would say, again, going back to how the NHS has operated for the last 20 years or so, is that the levers, the motivations, the business levers, I suppose, ultimately, that have been developed through that time and operated through much of it, were very much orientated around productivity, independence, and isolation. So there was a mechanism called payment by results, which was effectively a means of ensuring that an NHS provider was paid for every activity that they did. And irrespective of whether, frankly, sometimes there was a need for that activity to take place. And that created a certain motivation within NHS providers. And I speak as a substantive chief executive of an NHS provider, and having been on the board of NHS providers of different ilk since 2009, so over the last 13 or so years. And so the motivational levers that were in place for the last 20 years or so have created a fundamental divide, and often a fundamental divide between need and capacity. So what was built as capacity didn't necessarily determine or relate to the needs of local citizens and the needs of the local population. Now, I personally understand to an extent why payment by results back in 2000, 2001 was developed. At that point in time, there was a large waiting list. Right now, there's a large waiting list, but back then, we weren't anywhere near the 18-week targets that we've luxuriously had over the last 10 or so years. So there was a need to motivate providers to get through as much activity as they could to bring those waiting lists down. The trouble was, once that was done and achieved, payment by results stayed. So providers were still motivated to basically bankrupt commissioners, and they're NHS, they're all the same public purse organisations, to bankrupt commissioners as long as the providers were financially viable. Now that can't be right, can it? As a single public sector entity, that absolutely can't be right. So our trick now is to ensure that the efficiency, the business-like ethos that was built into foundation trusts over the last 20 years stays, because that efficiency, productivity agenda is really important. You see that throughout industry, whilst appreciating that we're all in it together and we have a collective responsibility to not destabilise one another, to ensure that we all focus on the same vision, the same direction of travel. And if that is to make sure that we do more preventative work, if that's to make sure that we chase need rather than react to demand, because A, clinically, that's the right answer, B, socially, that's the right answer, and C, financially, that's the right answer, then we're creating the right environment to ensure that that business case is the business case we chase. The business case we chase isn't the one that just makes sure that we do more hips, more knees, more arthroscopies. It's the business case that's the best for the population. And that's what we've fundamentally lacked over the last 20 years because of the policy that we've been operating within. Was there a second part to the question? I can't remember. Apologies if I've only answered part of it.
I actually talked about the enablement service that was put into place a few years ago, which is a wonderful service, and people, greatly benefited from it. Again, that was stopped, and I do think that that's backward thinking. And as I'm getting older now, it's quite nice to hear that these services may be reinstated, because I think they're so beneficial to keep people in their own homes, and that appears to be your agenda.
Yeah, so Unfortunately, I can't comment specifically on the reablement service because in the role I'm in at the moment, I've A, been in it since the 1st of December, and B, I'm not party to any CCG decisions that have occurred to date. They would have been made by the CCG, and that's not my role. So unfortunately, I can't comment on that. What I can comment on is that if any service going forward gives us the opportunity to reduce demand, gives us the opportunity for individuals to live independently in their chosen place of residence for longer, then why on earth wouldn't we provide the service? I know that's a bit of a generic response, but as I say, an apology that because I'm not the CCG accountable officer, I'm not able to comment on what's been and gone within the CCG. But as I say, sorry, I've got a bit of feedback. As I said, any service that gives us the opportunity to, I'm getting an awful lot of feedback. Sorry.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, we are getting a bit of feedback.
Yeah.
Sorry. I know there's another question. Thank you, Councillor Barron. Councillor Harold.
Thank you. I should declare an interest in this as a former member of the Patient Council, Eastern District CCG, and patient representative. We were very concerned within the CCG about joining with Stoke-on-Trent financially. And this is because the needs in Stoke-on-Trent are profoundly different to the needs in South Staffordshire. We noted at the time that the first proposals came out that the health and well-being of those in South Staffordshire is significantly better than those in Stoke-on-Trent, which houses a Home Office refugee centre, a considerable number of minority ethnic groups, and that the life expectancy and the well-being of people within the Stoke-on-Trent area is significantly different to ours here, due to industrial heritage as well. I'm interested to hear what you have to say about looking at local communities, but I'm still very anxious about the finances of this and how they're spent within our area when we have an predominantly elderly population here, which has significant difference in need to those in Stoke-on-Trent. And if you're comparing the two within the integrated care system, then it's very obvious that more money will be spent in the Stoke-on-Trent area than it will be spent here, and more staffing will be required within the Stoke-on-Trent area. I'm interested to hear what you've had to say about the system, and I'm looking now and thinking we have locality documents that will be useful to you in terms of background information on housing, the comments in there about the health of people and about our GP services, about various aspects of our background within our area, which may be very useful to you. However, we are now having a massive backlog of people waiting for national health care. If the need in Stoke-on-Trent is more profound, which I expect it to be, than within South Staffordshire, I'd like an assurance from you that you will look very carefully at the needs within our area and that you will pay some attention. It's interesting to hear you talk about hips and knees and everything else, because those are the things that are worrying people and really reduce people's quality of life very significantly. So, in terms of the finances, can you explain to us how you are going to prioritise welfare of those in South Staffordshire against those in Stoke-on-Trent? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So I suppose the first thing I'd say is that the ICS is a single entity. So what's been and gone in terms of the 6 CCGs within Staffordshire is well, on the 1st of July will no longer be legally relevant. So there will be a single pot of money that's allocated to the ICS for Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, and that in the first instance is spent as it is spent at the moment. So we have contracts in place with all of our organisations, general practice, University Hospital North Midlands, Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust, etc., etc. And all of those contracts will remain in place for the next period of time. The objective of the ICS fundamentally is to ensure that we improve services through, if you like, incremental improvements, and that needs to be done at a localized level. So essentially, as well as the white paper that I mentioned a moment ago around integration, a levelling up white paper was produced, again at similar timescale to the integration white paper. And I suppose the title in itself says everything. It's about levelling up. So what I wouldn't expect is that any one part of the system was worsened in terms of, actively worsened in terms of outcomes or inequality measures, to ensure that another part of the system improved in terms of outcomes or inequalities. There will be key hotspots within the system, depending on which subject matter you look at, which of the areas, whether that be mental health, physical health, or aspects of mental or physical health. There'll be aspects within the system, hotspots, that we absolutely need to address and make sure that we prioritise. And the strategy, the system strategy, with things like population health management, things like, I think you may have alluded to, the joint strategic need assessment analyses, all of that rich data needs to be utilised to ensure that we collectively understand and own that hotspot analysis, and we collectively understand and own the inequalities and the outcomes that aren't where we want them or need them to be. They'll be smattered right across Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent. There may be specific pockets in Stoke-on-Trent that are of particular concern because of the deprivation levels that you alluded to within Stoke. But we absolutely can't downgrade, worsen one part of the system simply to enable us to spend money in another location to upgrade. And the other thing I'll say is, fundamentally, I don't think it's about the money. So having been on NHS boards, as I said, for the last 13 or so years, the service improvements, the quality improvements that I've seen work the best, save money, but at the same time, improve the quality of care. And for me, I see huge opportunity to be able to do both of those things. So the point I mentioned a moment ago, and I've reiterated on a few occasions, about ensuring that we don't chase demand, we proactively address need, is something that's lacking at the moment across large parts of Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent. If we can implement that different way of thinking, that different ethos, and that different way of operating, then that won't cost any more money. It will save money. And actually, I would imagine it'll also give a huge amount of increase in pride and appreciation of the services that we offer in the NHS and social care. So there are ways of doing this that aren't about simply shifting money around. And I absolutely don't advocate deteriorating services in one environment to ensure that we can improve services in another. This is absolutely about levelling up as opposed to levelling, well, down.
Thank you. I hold you to that.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that presentation. It was very good, very thought-making. My goodness, things are going to change again. Is it possible to have a copy of your presentation, please?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll Jenny's got that on record, so we can get that through to you. Well, I won't say tonight, but definitely tomorrow.
That's lovely. Thank you very much indeed. So thank you very much.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. I think we found that a very interesting presentation. Like Councillor Burrow says, it's like going round again, isn't it? Completely round again. Yes. Yeah. Yes. But thank you for asking the questions. At least it showed we were interested. Then we're on to the last one, unless you want to say anything more about that one. The work plan, please, Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good evening, members. Just a quick update on the work plan. I think it was really good for Peter to come along today. I think we're the first district and borough who had that talk so far. So hopefully, shall I turn the microphone off? It's echoing. So apologies. So hopefully that gives a good insight in terms of the strategic health view across Staffordshire.
No, Mark, you still. That's weird.
Apologies, members. I'm not sure what's gone on with the sound.
Carry on.
So with that piece of work will continue at various levels across the organisation. We're trying to ensure we make contacts and link in. Dave met with Peter Axon on Monday. Again, our view is we want a chair around the table. We want to be actively involved. We don't want to be a bit part player in this work. Subsequently, I think on the 21st of June, Peter and other members of the exec team are attending informal cabinet. And hopefully, as the work progresses, we'll be able to get a regular slot on this committee so members can directly ask the exec team questions and what's happening regarding in terms of health. In terms of our standard agenda items, obviously it's a wellbeing select committee. Our core purpose is external health and ensuring those partners who deliver those services come to the committee. But what we want to do is ensure a more regular agendaed items in terms of aspects of service delivery that this council is delivering that impacts on health. I know sometimes, sorry, Councillor Bennett. No, at times it's been difficult if we've not got things happening within the health economy to get those partners to the table. So what often happens is we end up missing meetings as we've got no regular updates. So again, I guess a plea to members is if you've got things in your communities that are important, if you let us know, we can get the relevant people to those meetings. Outside of that, what we will look to do is set a rolling programme up of some standard agenda items. So we will look to bring updates and officer will attend from leisure. So we'll give you some updates of what's happening in those fields. Maggie regularly attends on community safety with the police. But what we will start doing is getting some of those other teams to come and regularly update in terms of how the work they deliver is impacting on wellbeing across the district and on our residents. Again, we don't play the significant part of some of the health partners, but the services we deliver do have an impact on the wellbeing of our residents. So we'll be bringing a rolling theme of services forward so you can get to ask questions of those services. Hopefully that will ensure you're aware of what's happening and not to fill the gaps in this meetings, but to give a regular update. Those elements will always be trumped if there's issues around hospitals or GP surgeries or public health, but hopefully that will add value. And as Peter picked up, the wider determinants of health is a significant issue, and 80% of those issues sit outside of health, whether that's in our communities or the work that we deliver in support of prevention. So hopefully we'll start be bringing more of those agenda items forward over recent meetings, so we haven't got the gaps or have to cancel meetings because there's not any elements to scrutinise.
Councillor Burnett.
Yeah, definitely, Councillor Burnett, and it is still on the agenda. I guess it could have been one for Peter, as the ICS is an associate commissioner of Walsall, Wolverhampton and Dudley. So the main services in Staffordshire run from Burton or UNH&M in the north, but particularly in this patch, there's a significant amount of money that goes that way. So going forward again, it may be directly through ICS exec team that we get some of those answers. Councillor Bennett.
Anybody else would like to put something forward? Yes.
I'd like a bit more comment. We do clinics operating in that centre. No,
No, I don't know.
yeah, diabetic retinopathy.
Yeah.
And I think they have been quite successful. People are quite local clinics,
Yes.
and I think I'd like to see that elsewhere because I'm very conscious. Whichever way we go to move more patients out of the hospital setting. But it's been so well received. Obviously, there's no massive patient facilities with staff that. But some encourage the other activities available with very good remarks. Area
Yeah.
means that that's drive. Very well. Spending a friend on family period. To get their contract. Okay. And hospital settings. That's fair. Still very concerned about the bed blocking.
Yes. Yeah.
A bed blocking. Had a very successful. And some of the agencies that actually took. That's fair. That's fair. That's in there. Centre so over.
They came. Things and that wouldn't.
Yes.
Consequently.
Yeah.
When they do. 6-7 weeks. They're no longer.
That, yeah. Yeah.
And again, it's got backwards.
Yeah. Was this something to do with New Crossing?
Councillor, these services delivered from persons doing their NPFT services, so we could potentially ask them to come along to a committee meeting and update on that model.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I think as members were aware, the manager's always been to try and take more out of secondary care and put it in primary care. But I guess it's been a slow burn. But if we're seeing some good examples in the district, it might be a model that be replicated. And we know by bringing the breast screening use locally, the rates have been good because people haven't had to travel.
So can I ask, is it age concern that goes into the hospitals and assessing? Yeah. Can we do anything about this tomorrow? Someone to speak on it?
Yeah, no.
Maybe the new crop person can, we can ask the questions. I think Mark's going to get someone to come and speak to us. If that's all right with you. Is that okay? Our next meeting. Is there anything else to say?
Jenny's just sent through the slides from this evening, so I'll send that out to everybody shortly, so you've got a copy of the slide deck.
And also, it was very late knowing when our meeting was. Some people didn't know. Is there any way that we can sort that out? the.
I'll take it back to the member support team. I think because there was only the presentation from Peter and the work plan update, the information had gone out on CMIS, but I don't think hard copy papers had gone out, but I will
Strike
ask the question
what I
and ensure
call
they
a
go out.
calling letter, really, just to say, you've got this meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fortunately, Councillor Burnett, Councillor Hingley asked me to send a text last night and Tom got it out, or it might have been a very short meeting with nobody here, but
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Definitely need
Yeah.
sharpening up on that one, so that we all know, because we're missing about 4 or 5, aren't we? Yeah. I'm sure if they knew about it, they would have been here. It was interesting talk by Peter, wasn't it? But I think, yeah. I don't know if we have a date. Do we have a date?
will do.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what I was
It's
interested in.
it's calendar. It was coming up doubling, wasn't it? Like now. If I put that on, then I'm getting a double. Better without it. Oh, well.
It's the 13th of September. 13th of September, yeah.
The 13th of
13th September.
13th of September.
Yeah. What time? 5.
5 o'clock now.
Yes, 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
13. I'm looking.
1, 3. No, 13 after Tuesday. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I want to know where on the 18 weeks is really. I'm still waiting. Yeah.
I know.
Oh, you can't see that.
Oh,
No, we have to have a.
and we've got diabetic clinic. Yeah. But I'll come out.
I had one from Ireland the other day. Very nice.
Okay then, members, our next meeting will be September the 13th, 5 o'clock here, and hopefully we'll have someone from New Cross to come and talk to us. And also you should have the presentation of today come through.
Sure.
So, yeah, it'll take some time before it's sinks in.
Just ask, Trevor, so people not here registered, but nothing in our team's calendar.
She's got a different calendar today. I've got nothing on mine. Yeah, I'm in trouble with on mine.
Are you going to evangelise? What is that like? We go